even without conscious effort, when you are retaining energy or practicing purity in one way, shape, or form or another, you are going to be opening the possibilities of timelines that are going to be presented to you whether you want them to or not, right? So, one of these things in which you might notice is that when you are being pure on celibacy, for example, and you are actually trying to refrain from these negative connotations of sexual immorality, let's say, or just perverted thoughts, you might notice that cougars are going to be flirting with the shadow parts of you, and you are going to have this strong desire to want to desire her because she's sparking some kind of unknown timeline within you that's potentially there now. She's presenting to you, before you, a shadow timeline in which you are going to be unlocking the uncapped potential and the aggressive potential for the woman who is seemingly prescribing herself to be an antidote to your suffering. Now, the thing is about cougars is that they might take care of themselves really well. I know some attractive women who are in their 40s and 50s, some even in their 60s, right? Who they've taken care of themselves very well. And good on them. However, I, as a follower of Christ and a man of God, I cannot operate like that in good conscience. And although there are temptations, even because the temptations will be there, whether you want them to be or not sometimes, it's going to happen. Maybe it won't happen for you, I don't know. But for me, it's happened where I've noticed that there's this, especially recently, there's these cougars that are trying to flirt with me in such a way that they are subtly trying to present themselves to be the unrealized potential of the most desired lover that they could have been. They're trying to time travel back to their 20s with me. But in reality, it's really about them, for them flirting with my shadow, right? And if anybody doesn't really know what I'm saying here when it comes to the shadow, so Carl Jung had the idea of the shadow archetype, which is essentially all of the repressed dark parts of you that you didn't want to admit that were actually there. And people can confront their shadows very much so, but they have a very difficult time confronting their anima or their animus. The anima is the totality of female experiences inside a male psyche, and the animus is the totality of masculine or male experiences inside a female psyche. Now, to think about it like this, right, when you go back to the timeline theory. So the timeline theory, you guys know now that, like, this is blowing my mind each and every day with the amount of craziness that is coming from the timeline theory. Those of you that have been watching me for about a week and a half, 2 weeks now, you'll know that this is something that's been continually developing. And I haven't made an actual video on it yet, but I know I'm going to sooner or later, because it is a completely new way to look at the reality in which we live. However, it's not like something new. Like, I didn't create this. Like, I didn't create the timeline. I didn't create the time circle. Okay, last night I had a dream where a voice told me it's not just timelines, it's time circles. And I thought about this and I was like, what in the world? And so I thought about it in this sense. So there's a timeline here. Think about like two parallel lines. You have the individual timeline and then you have the collective timeline here. Time circles are where the individual matches up with the universal, or you can be on your own timeline up here, but not operating at the universal. You're in a fake reality when you're in a time circle up above, not connecting to the parallel line that is the universal timeline below. What these cougars want to do is put you in a place where you are up here above the individual timeline and nowhere near the universal timeline. they want to make it seem like you're being lifted up, but in reality, you're being you're being squashed into a fantasy. And it's inverted though, like, at least in this metaphor, it's inverted. So it looks like you're going somewhere great, right? But in reality, it's actually not. And celibacy is going to be very powerful in this type of instance, because think about this, right? Again, there are going to be certain states, psychologically speaking, in your mind that are going to trigger certain types of events that are going to be potent to your understanding of life. And these events are not always operating purely on the individual timeline, right? It's like the universal timeline, and you might be just in a time circle, okay, experiencing the universal and the individual simultaneously. You're experiencing the universal and the individual simultaneously, but it could be multiple time circles that you're in on the same timeline, okay? Now, what do I mean by this? Because this is where we're basically doing physics through psychology, and we're doing psychology through physics. And we have to be very mindful of this, because it's crazy that talking about cougars flirting with your shadow can actually promote this type of thought, right? Or the extrapolation of these thoughts, because it seems to me that the cougar, she is a woman who has this sense of yearning to go back to her younger self, right? She wants to feel like she's being chosen by this dominant man in his 20s because she's just that good, right? It's not about you, man. It's about her. She wants to convince you that it's about you and how great you are, but really she's thinking that no, I want to see if I can still get a kind of guy like this. That's what it's about for her. This is why I don't think it's really appropriate to go after older women as a man. And I'm not saying that it's going to all be like this, because of course there are exceptions, but there are generalities for a reason. Okay, there are generalities for a reason. There are timelines that are existing for a reason, and there are timelines that could exist that don't exist for a reason. Okay, now when I say that, technically speaking, you can actually imagine timelines that don't exist, but the thing is that I don't think that's quite the proper phrasing, because they technically do exist. They're just not happening. So reality is what's happened, or what is happening, or what will happen, whereas what can exist, well, that is the multiverse for all intents and purposes. Because I was also thinking about it like this, right? So with the individual timeline and the collective timeline, with the time circles that connect like a parallel line, like the parallel lines, right? The thing is that you are going to be living in a sense of who you think you are at certain times, and women are great reflections of that. They can reflect this great positive demeanor toward you. Like, women will reflect a lot of different things about you in a really positive way, but they also have the ability to try to steal your timeline if you're not careful. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, they're literally trying to destiny swap. So that's where you have to be careful with them flirting with your shadow. And I'm not saying they all do this. Okay, I'm not saying they all do this. I'm just saying that this is why you need to be careful, because when a woman is trying to steal your destiny, what she's trying to do is steal your potential for possible outcomes in certain timelines. Okay, with the timeline theory, I had a great question in the Regal Change Academy today. Somebody asked about destiny in regard to the timeline theory. And it's like, well, with the timeline theory, destiny is not certain, because it's a matter of your choices that you make through there. Now, it doesn't mean that that choice is real. It just means that there is a choice. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, remember in the Matrix when Neo had to, if anybody's not watched the Matrix, this is probably not going to make sense for you, but remember in the Matrix where Neo meets the architect of the Matrix, right? And he has to choose between the right and the left door. He basically has to choose between saving the species and the generality of life, or saving Trinity, his love. And the architect is all about probabilities, right? All about probabilities. And so he's constructed the matrix 5 times, and he's constructed this fake reality. The architect you can think about as the demiurge, okay? So the and I'm speaking about the demiurge as far as the Satan creation of the physical, the purely physical, because we live in a spiritual world. And so everything is physical, but it's also multidimensional. And you might be seeing people, like, I'm sure you've seen people who are like the Walking Dead, right? And the Cougars, bro, the Cougars are like the Walking Dead, but dressed like the woman in the red dress from the Matrix. Like, some of them out here, they can be like that. They look that good, right? But at the same time, like, you know that spiritually they're not there. Like, you can see them on the outside, but spiritually they're like, ugh, they're dark. Well, okay, so going back to the Neo and the Matrix, right? The architect gives Neo this decision to make, because he's already created the Matrix 5 times, right? So the people that are too stubborn to wake up in the Matrix, they think that they're fighting against the agents, when in reality they're just controlled opposition. So now in the Matrix, Neo realizes this. In the Matrix, Neo realizes, like, oh my gosh, like, we're not even fighting a real fight. We're just fighting because we're fighting. And so Neo sees the outside of this time loop, and outside of the time circle too. And he's able to separate himself from both the universal and the individual in real time, and he chooses Trinity. He chooses to save Trinity, right? That was not on the probability list of the great architect of the Matrix at all. They did the math. The architect did the math, and he assumed that Neo was going to choose the saving the species over here door, when instead he chose the saving Trinity. Well, what does that say? Well, it says that sometimes love is beyond rationality. Okay, sometimes love doesn't really make sense. Well, it's because it's love is what happens when two people choose a certain reality. It's when people choose to see, and going back to reality, right? Like, what's happened has happened, what is happening, and what will happen. That's reality. It's all about what's actually happened, okay? So there are things that exist that are not happening, but there are also things that don't exist that could happen, but that's not what will happen, right? It could happen, but it's not. Like, this is where the multiverse thing gets into play, right? So you have to look at these Cougars in the sense of, like, okay, is this actually love? Or are you just trying to be with the species here? Okay, is this actually love? Because they're flirting with your shadow, and they're trying to get you to stay stuck in the time circles, right? But they're trying to get you to stay stuck in the time circles that are above the universal timeline. These are time circles that are not even connected to the universal timeline. So they want you stuck in a fantasy. They want you essentially in a matrix, bro. Some of these Cougars want you in a matrix. And especially when you're on celibacy and you're harnessing all this power, dude, they are going to come after you. The female energy, the Cougar female energy is going to come after you hard. And it's up to you to determine how you actually want to live this life. It's up to you to determine, are you going to choose the love of the shadow? And it's not even real love, right? It's just, it's literally lust disguised as love. Or are you going to choose real love, in the sense of, it's not just one person per se. You are choosing to save, like when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, that means that anybody who isn't awake, right, might as well be you in a past timeline or in a future timeline, just depending on how you look at time, right? So it might as well be you. And that cougar that's trying to manipulate you, that might as well be you in another timeline. And I'm not saying that this is the case. I'm not saying that it's not the case. I'm just saying that it might as well be the case that that cougar is trying to put you in a sense of a time circle that is not connected to God in any way, shape, or form. How do you think that that's going to work? And what do you think you're supposed to do in that situation? You're supposed to choose love. Okay, remember to love your neighbor as yourself. What would you do to and for yourself? Okay, how would you really operate in this way? Would you give in to lust and forget everything that you're doing? Because you're basically, what you're doing when you encounter the cougar, and really any type of woman that is going to try to put you in the shadow realm, but like, or trying to flirt with your shadow. Whoa. I just had a few ideas come up to play. But essentially, she's trying to activate an unconscious timeline. That's exactly what it is. She's trying to activate an unconscious timeline through your shadow. But it's not for the greater good. And so you're going to have to go through this as much as you're going to have to go through this. But also, it's going to be up to you to determine what kind of pattern you are actually on. Think about the golden ratio, right? Everybody knows the golden ratio. Okay, why is that so powerful? Why is it the case that that's so powerful? Okay, because the golden ratio is essentially a two-dimensional perception of what it's like to go through time through the fourth dimension. And so you have to be careful with these women that are older than you too, because they are more experienced, and I guarantee you that they will try to put you in a time circle that is not going through time appropriately, like in the golden ratio. They want you out of the golden ratio. All these Jezebels, all these witches, all these demonic spirits, you might say, these dark spirits, these dark essence, because it's not that all cougars are evil. It's not what I'm saying, but a lot of them don't have good intentions. Because this is why it's so important to know like who you are, because you'll be able to see people's intentions better. And people might be able to be hiding it for quite a while. They can be really good at it. But then eventually, sooner or later, you're going to see that there's a timeline trying to live through them to try to force you into their timeline and destiny swap you. And that's where you have to be careful. Okay, that's where you have to be really careful. But I hope that this message was useful and insightful for you, something that I've been thinking deeply about just over the past few hours and kind of contemplating a few things here and there. And so I wanted to make this video for you guys. But I hope that you all stay blessed. Sign up for the free tier of the Regal Change Academy or the premium tier. The free tier just gets you into the community. Then we have the premium tier, which is the group calls and the classes, etc., where you get the creme de la creme, really, of the RCA, the Regal Change Academy. Or you could sign up for a one-on-one session or the Godlike Master Initiation Program. But that's really for people, the Godlike Master Initiation Program is really for people that want to go deeper into these topics. They really want to go deep, right? They really want to transform themselves and their lives in a very positive way and do a total life upheaval, because that's really what it is. So with all that being said, peace until next time.